Microsoft shared insight about its game development strategy. Let's dive in. The portfolio of Microsoft Game Studios, or Xbox Game Studios, is quite robust, with 23 studios now under the umbrella of Phil Spencer and Satya Nadella. There are a lot of balls in the air juggling and just a lot of moving components in the Xbox org. And so I guess this week technically, but probably most people think last week, Microsoft had a media and analyst event where they talked pretty candidly and in depth about how they are thinking about everything from their services to their hardware to their game portfolio to their strategy to xCloud. And I'm diving into all of the individual facets because unlike some of their traditional media events that are broadcast to the world, this one was much more structured in a way that honestly felt like an analyst call where they were justifying their maneuvers and laying out their chess pieces as they were making the moves in real time. It was a really fascinating look. I understand why Microsoft did not broadcast this, and I actually agree with their decision. And so what I'm going to do now is kind of dive through their game strategy, because there were a lot of different pieces that overlap that help to lay the foundation of how Microsoft is truly thinking about the world of consoles and everything else and their streaming and just putting this narrative together. So I want to kick it off with a quote from Microsoft CEO Satya Nadella, where he said, "Microsoft is all in on gaming. We believe we can play a leading role in democratizing gaming and defining that future of interactive entertainment, quite frankly, at scale." That is a key there, is that Microsoft throughout this presentation kept talking about their ability to tap into resources, meaning things like Azure and also other resources, quite literally like money, because Microsoft has a lot of it. And the game development environment is a capital rich environment. You need a lot of money to develop a high quality, high caliber game and ship it on time. And we know the challenges that entails. It's a very difficult process, which is why Microsoft is quite literally dumping billions upon billions of dollars into Xbox to just grow the portfolio of tools and services and platforms and reach that the gaming service has. So this is a really important development because Microsoft is getting giving very clear messaging from the top down that everybody from the CEO all the way through the org are supporting Xbox through this growth initiative. Right now, they are in a growth segment, which is not something Microsoft can say about every single segment that it participate. Things like Windows are very much mature, whereas Xbox has a lot of potential for growth, which is why Microsoft is dumping gasoline onto the fire in the terms of capital to grow this out, including things like Bethesda, that type of an acquisition. So as we head into E3, which is kicking off as of the time they're recording this tomorrow, there's a lot of things just to understand as Microsoft goes up on stage and talks about all the games that are coming in the near and hopefully in the near future, and then through a little bit extended of a horizon, because they are very clearly laying out a game plan. So the next quote I want to dive into is Matt Booty, I believe, saying, "We want to get to a point of releasing a new game every quarter. We know that a thriving entertainment service needs a consistent and exciting flow of new content, so our portfolio will continue to grow as our service grows." So there are two really key points here that we need to break apart. First is the delivery of a game every single quarter. So I did some back of the napkin math here. This is not perfect, but Microsoft has 23 game studios. If you make the assumption, and again, I know this isn't a good assumption, but if you make the assumption that each studio is developing one title, as of today, Microsoft actually has enough studios to deliver a new game every single quarter if there is a 5-year development cycle on those titles. Now, most games, that should be sufficient. We know that some will stretch longer. I mean, you can look at Cyberpunk as an example, Halo Infinite as an example. Some will be shorter, and keep in mind, not every game has to be a AAA title, but as of today, Microsoft on paper, theoretically speaking, has enough studios under its portfolio to ship a new game every single quarter if it has a 5-year development cycle. Obviously, if some games have a 4-year, that's only going to make their lives easier. But as of right now, they can start to deliver on that vision of delivering a game every single quarter. Now, you have to kind of keep that in relative, like you look at Minecraft, for example. They're not going to deliver a new Minecraft every quarter or in a quarter. That just doesn't really make sense. So it's not a perfect analogy, but it's a rough idea that Microsoft does now have enough studios to deliver on that type of a content model, which is something they are pursuing. So to keep that in mind, the second important point here is our portfolio will continue to grow as our service grows. That is a very clear statement that as I believe Game Pass continues to grow, and hopefully Microsoft is looking for like a hockey stick style growth, meaning, it comes over and then shoots up. They will continue to buy more and more content. That is, it's very clear language that if they can see a strong correlation between having new studios and new content into Game Pass growth, they will continue to approach that aggressively, right? They've already done it with Bethesda. I think it's a big way of testing the waters, but Microsoft got some early data with Game Pass, and then they said, hey, look, we know that exclusive titles from big name publishers are going to do well, so they went out and snatched up Bethesda. And if that model continues to prove viable, then it's a very easy business case to be like, look, we can go buy X studio, we know what's going to happen to Y gamers, like the Y variable in gaming, in our Game Pass subscription model, and how that's going to positively impact the business. It becomes a much easier justification to buy gaming studios. So it's really important just to see how they do that. Also, it's interesting to see how additional gaming endpoints are going to increase the potential for Game Pass. Right now, we all sort of believe, I shouldn't say all sort of believe, but right now Game Pass is primarily available on two places, the console and the PC. Now, that is going to open up the door here in the next few weeks or months, or whenever Microsoft ships it, to the browser, to all iOS users, and we already know it's available to a lot of people on Android as well. But is that actually, are people natively going to sign up for the iOS experience? That's a really big unknown right now, or the browsing experience for that matter, right? Will people play Game Pass exclusively on an iPhone? They don't have a console, they don't have they probably have a PC. Will they exclusively play it on a phone? Will they exclusively play it on a browser? These are the questions that Microsoft is still trying to just figure out. And that is part of the reason why I think that quote says, as the service grows, if these endpoints prove viable, then Microsoft will continue to approach things aggressively. Now, just because Microsoft has bought a bunch of studios, they made it very clear that they're not ignoring the fact that third-party exclusives are off the agenda. Actually, they said, as we continue to work with world-class independent developers to build first-party exclusives, we've been talking about Flight Simulator, and that was developed by a third-party studio in France. So this is a key here, is that Microsoft isn't necessarily always approaching the title for the mindset of, if we want an exclusive on Game Pass or our service, we have to buy the studio. They're very clearly calling out that they're going to continue to work with third-party studios to bring content exclusives to the platform. This is a big deal for multiple reasons. One, it opens up the door to who and what can be an exclusive on Xbox. That's one thing. But for third-party developers who necessarily aren't looking to be bought, they still have an avenue to work with Xbox, and that they aren't saying it's either we buy you or nothing. This is a pretty key development and understanding of how Microsoft is thinking about this, that, hey, they will still go to third-party studios and buy exclusive content, and that is not off the agenda. It is not something that they have to own holistically to make those types of modeling work for Game Pass growth, because that could be a very interesting way, again, to invest in Game Pass from Microsoft's perspective, is just to go out and, not randomly, but strategically snatch up third-party IP as an exclusive lockup for some time without having to go all in and buy the studio. But again, there's got to be the right mechanisms and modeling in place to show that it, again, helps Xbox, more specifically Game Pass, grow over the long term. The key here being is not everything Microsoft does is going to result in an acquisition. The other interesting thought here is, now that we know that Microsoft has a ton of different endpoints and they're approaching these endpoints aggressively, right? We've got them, just about every single thing out there, and eventually these streaming devices will allow TVs new and old to access Xbox Cloud Gaming. Would Microsoft ever make a dedicated game that works best on the phone or mobile experience as opposed to, say, the whole console experience? It's an interesting thought, and including something like that in Game Pass. Initially, I don't think so, but it's not inconceivable that Microsoft might say, hey, look, we have Game Pass, it's growing really well, but we're lacking in the mobile space. We really need to boost up that. And they go out and they buy content that is a mobile exclusive for Game Pass subscribers. It's an interesting idea. And Microsoft has built titles like this, or at least they've had these in their portfolio many, many, many years ago. There was a great game, I've mentioned it many times in here, called Fable Coin Golf, which was exactly that. It took some of their IP, it took some of their prowess, and they brought it over into the Xbox world, but on a mobile phone. And so they tied that all in together to help try to launch their Windows Phone. I think at the time it was called Windows Phone Series 7, but here we are today, and we all know the fate of that. But it's really interesting to think about, would Microsoft go truly in on a mobile game to try to boost up those endpoints? I think it's plausible. I don't think it's going to be something we see right away, But I think most of us can agree today that all the games so far have been console exclusives or console titles that get adapted to the PC if they ship them on the PC, or adapted to play in the browser or with touch mobile. They're not designed mobile first and then adapted to the console. And there's some logic behind this. Satya Nadella and Phil Spencer had talked about they believe that the gaming total market of users is 3 billion. Only 250 million of those maximum would be console users. So could you target the other, like 2.25 billion people with Game Pass if you can create compelling mobile titles? It's something I think Microsoft will eventually have to decide if that is a path they're going to go down. We aren't quite there yet. At least Microsoft hasn't signaled if that is something they're going to do, but something to keep an eye out for. Also, speaking of keeping an eye out, tomorrow is E3, which is where a ton of studios will show off games that are hopefully coming soon. Some of them have a little bit longer time horizons. We just saw Elden Ring from the Summer Game Fest will be launching, I believe, in January. At least that's the targeted timeline. That's a super exciting title, but we're going to see a bunch more content come out here in the next, we'll just say, few days to a week in June. So things that I am going to be watching for next or tomorrow when Microsoft does their E3 showcase is the term exclusive. We know how Microsoft has really stretched what exclusive means. It means exclusive to the Xbox platform, not the Xbox console. I don't expect Microsoft to shift that modeling or that language too much, but it's just, again, something I'm going to be watching for to see how they approach this, because now exclusive actually means it's available on console, it's available in the browser, it's available on Android, it's available on iOS, and it's available just through the Xbox, right? And so Xbox Game Pass might be, I'm curious if we'll ever hear the terms Xbox Game Pass exclusive, meaning you have to be part of Game Pass to actually get access to the title, and you can't buy it outside of that. That is another interesting little economic lever that Microsoft can use to try to elevate Game Pass and get more people into that platform. Because you think about it, if a game, ballparking it, is $60 new, that's a couple months of Game Pass, and that's the lever that they would rather you use so that you stay inside of Game Pass rather than just jumping in and out. That is to be seen. We'll see what happens here. Microsoft is also really pushing Game Pass heavily. Not that I haven't mentioned it 17 times. It's actually now part of the OOBE, or the out-of-box experience, part of Windows setup. I had not seen this, but in one of the later insider builds, when you do a fresh install, it actually says, hey, do you want to sign up for Game Pass for $1? Like right in the boot screens, or initial setup screens, which is a little bold, if I'm honest. I'm not sure how I feel about that, but Microsoft is really hoping to capitalize people on setting up a new PC and signing up for Game Pass at the same time. But the key takeaway here is that Microsoft is putting clear language out that as Game Pass grows, they will continue to grow their portfolio of studios. I'm not saying that they aren't doing that already and already have plans in place, but they made it very clear that there is a linear connection between Game Pass growth and their studio growth. And so once Microsoft validates everything that is put onto paper so far, then they will continue to approach more studios and more thinking about that. Because right now they're trying to get to a model of shipping a game every quarter. We know how difficult that is. You can already look at what happened with Halo Infinite. Why not every month? Why not every month? If Microsoft can prove that putting a title out of AAA quality caliber every single month will have exponential results in Game Pass, then that's a model that they will chase down. So we're looking towards quarterly launches for Microsoft. That is their game plan. This is how they have been thinking about game studios and purchases and acquisitions. And so that is what Microsoft talked about a little bit in their media stuff. And so I'm going to be digging into other aspects of that conversation that Microsoft has talked about. Make sure to keep it subscribed here, because the only BS on this channel is me.